What kinds of questions should I be asking to find the flight school right for me? Let's find out. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Late Departure. Once again, I'm Adam, and we're continuing on my journey today. I'm still trying to find the right flight school for me, and that's a really difficult thing because in Vancouver, we have a lot of flight schools. So as always, I did my research and I checked out a whole bunch of places. I went to AV Canada, the website. I talked with other pilots in the Flying Canucks Canadian Pilot Discord. I went and looked at a lot of YouTube videos. There's a really good one by someone called the Thrust Academy, and there were ones by 74 Gear, and of course all the big pilot YouTubers have done at least one video on this. So taking all of their information, I made a summary of what questions I should ask to the flight schools, and actually I've been asking these questions and I found them pretty effective so far. If you think I'm missing some, please let me know, but let's go through them and I'll let you know how things have gone so far with these questions. So the first, and arguably one of the most important questions, is what is the plane availability and instructor availability at the school? Now, this is something that really varies between schools. Some schools have a lot of aircraft, some of them have a lot of instructors, and some of them have a lot of students. So it really depends on what the ratio is like. So for example, some of the schools that I talk with, they have a whole bunch of students, so many that it's really difficult for students to get bookings in planes. And sometimes most of the instructors are there to build time so that they can become pilots as well. Well, if they leave all of a sudden, does the school have enough instructors to, bring someone else in to help finish your license? And that's really important. One of the schools I went to was so busy. They had something where at the end of every month, all the students would have to bid on the planes. Basically at midnight, the stroke of midnight, everyone would be able to make bookings. And in that kind of situation, it's really difficult. If you're not fast, it's like buying concert tickets. All of the bookings are gone, and that means you can't get up. And that's a big thing, like Kelsey from 74 Gear always says.
Because if you can't fly, you can't learn how to fly.
If you want to learn how to fly, you got to get up in the air. And that means getting in a plane. Another really important thing is whether or not the school asks you to buy a bunch of supplemental stuff. So some of the schools I went to, this was really true. They said, you need to buy this package, it's mandatory. You need to buy the books from us. You need to buy all these extra tools and stuff. And of course, when you learn how to fly, there are going to be some mandatory things that you should buy. You'll need the standard textbooks. You'll probably need an E6B or some kind of calculator or a way to figure out different formulas and stuff for flying. But if the school says you must buy it from us, because the schools are getting a commission from selling these items, they might be getting 10, 15% or even more from selling these items. But a lot of the flight schools I went to are really cool about it. And they said, just go to Amazon, you can buy stuff up cheap there, no worries. And that's the kind of thing that I was sort of looking for. And really for me, it's a red flag if people really start to push things on you that you might not necessarily even have to buy or even have to buy from them for whatever price they're selling it for. Now, the funny thing about a lot of these questions is, when I first saw this on some of the channels where they were talking about the different scams that flight schools have, I thought, this isn't going to happen to me. Like the schools out here, they're pretty honest. There's everyone, it's Canada. People should be kind, polite, above board. But the next one here, which is whether or not they try to push extra ratings on you that you don't want. That actually happened to me at one of the schools that I visited where the CFI was saying, while you're doing this, you got to do this rating and this rating and this rating. And I asked, well, that wasn't really my plan. Is it really mandatory for me to do that? And he's like, oh, no, but it's, you should do all these ones, you do all these extras and stuff. And, that again is sort of a red flag. It says to me that they're not asking me to find out exactly what I'd like to do. Of course, I'm still new at this. I don't know what I have to do exactly, but if they could walk me through what the ratings are and when or why I might need them, that would be very useful, a lot more useful than them telling me you need to get these ratings, you have to do this, because for them that's just more money in the bank. And for me, it might not even be a rating that I even use. They might not even know that the route that I'm going on right now to become a certain type of pilot, maybe I don't need a float rating or something like that. Now, this question I think is really important about asking how many students complete the course, what's the expected completion time, and A lot of schools I went to, they're really honest. A lot of them said, the average, the minimum is 45 hours or 40 hours or something like that for your private pilot's license. Realistically, people finish it in 60, something like that. And, that's honest, but there are some schools they try to say, our students are all finishing it at 40 hours because we're the best school or something like that, because more often than not, that doesn't really seem to be the case, especially now that I'm asking real students about it. And then, of course, there's the opposite side as well. If they're saying that their students are taking 80 to 100 hours to complete the private pilot's license, even though the average is around 60 or 50, that's another red flag. That means that they might be trying to milk you for more money when they might not need to. I actually read about sort of a horror story the other day where some student had gone to a school and they'd actually done nearly 100 hours of dual flying time and never soloed, just because the school told them that's the way it was. And, that's not the way it is at most schools. And that's why you really need to do your research here. Another thing is asking how much the average student spends. And, the price fluctuates a little bit from school to school. Like the prices are fairly standard, but there is the slight chance that they might be trying to, take advantage of you. So it's just something that you really need to consider. You see, I'm here at the Vancouver airport once again. You see a aircraft out there about to take off. One of my favorite places to come here. So the next one is also really important, and that is whether or not the program is pay as you go or pay up front. And this is something that a lot of people have said is a really big red flag. I came across a few schools that were saying, we want you to pay for the instructor time up front. So we want you to put down $10,000 right now. That's really not cool. And that some places do that, but the majority do not. So if you find a place that's saying that it's saying that you have to pay everything up front, that's probably a good sign that you might want to look elsewhere, because it's not good practice in my opinion. And what happens if they just up and leave? And that's happened. I've heard of a few schools even here in Vancouver where all of a sudden there's a change in ownership or something like that, and all of a sudden the students who had invested their money are left high and dry. So something to consider there. Now, the next one is also really important. So do I need to pay for extra ground time, or are they trying to bill me for extra time that I may or may not need? If you need the extra time and you request it, that's one thing. But again, I had an experience where I talked with one flight school, and the guy said, we could totally get one of the instructors to sit down with you to brief you on something. It'll take, an extra 4 or 5 hours. I don't know, like $500, $600. And I was just thinking, whoa, that's not cool at all. That's not cool at all. So that's something you really need to look out for. Just make sure that, do your research and find out whether or not they're trying to charge you for more time than is necessary for ground briefings, or if they're trying to throw in extra briefings that might not be part of, what you might deem as good practice there at the flight school. Again, if you have questions, come to something like the Flying Canucks Canadian Pilot Discord. Lots of friendly people there can answer questions. I have a link to it down in the description here. But yeah, just try to ask around if you're not sure, because a lot of experienced people will be able to point you in the right direction. Another big thing is the promise of jobs, like flight instructor jobs. And that's something that some of the schools do that I've heard of. Some of the schools I went to as well said, well, if you complete it here, then we might be able to get you a job right away. And again, that's just trying to sweeten the deal, try and get me to go to their school. That might be, hiding the fact that some of their practices might not be above board, or hiding the fact that they're not doing maintenance properly or something like that. So just something to keep an eye out for. Be careful of promises that they might make you for, jobs or things like that. The next one is really important. So do they let you see the maintenance records? And so some of the students that I talked to around Vancouver, they'd gone to schools where the maintenance was atrocious, where there were pieces missing, avionics were broken, things like that. I haven't experienced that yet, but that's something when I did go to the schools, I did ask them for the maintenance records. Some of them did show me and some of them did not. And, that's I think that says a lot about the integrity of the school. If they're hiding the maintenance records, that should be, something you should be able to look into, because it's your life and your safety before you get into an aircraft. So you want to make sure that, the aircraft you're getting into has been maintained properly, is not missing anything, or not overdue for like an engine overhaul or something like that, could cost you your life. Now, the next thing about asking about seeing every airplane they have is also a super important thing, because I went to a bunch of these schools. A lot of the schools, I'd say most of the schools are very honest. They show you their fleet of aircraft if they're available, if they're not out flying at the moment. But a few of the schools I went to did show me their nicest aircraft. And meanwhile, they have some older aircraft that inevitably they're going to put you in when you start your training there. And that's what happened to some of the people that I've interviewed so far, some of the students who've gone to other schools. And I was shocked when I heard about that. They're like, oh, we went there and they had this brand new 172 and it had all this great equipment in it. And then they put us in this super old thing and the interior was all torn up and falling apart. And so that's just something you want to be careful of. Make sure that you see the whole fleet and that they're not just showing you their show pony to get you in the door. Now, another thing is kind of related to an earlier question about whether they force ratings on you and stuff, but are they willing to sit down with you and sort of map out a plan for how your training can unfold in the future? Because for me, a lot of the schools, again, they did take the time to sit down and talk with me about it. But also a lot of the schools didn't. A lot of the schools said, we're busy, register here, and then we'll consider walking you through and talking about how we can meet your goals and stuff. Which from a business perspective just blows my mind, because if you're trying to sell a product or a service, you want to, you got to sell it to the person. You got to show them that your product or your service is going to meet their needs, and a lot of the places did not. When I emailed, I was shocked that I sent out just a nice organized email. Quite a few of the schools, they wrote back with really detailed responses, but a lot of them, they just sent back a form response, a pre-made email response that didn't answer any questions at all and just reiterated stuff on their website. And that just annoyed me. That was not really great. And I'll probably talk about that kind of stuff a bit more in future episodes, which schools specifically I found did that. I might do an episode here just about that specifically, but yeah, it's just something that you really want to consider. Now, in terms of things like tax deductible receipts, I found that this is pretty common. I didn't see any school, I didn't talk with any school that didn't issue receipts, but it is always good just to ask. I'm not sure exactly how the Private Career Training Institute certification in Vancouver applies to the schools, because some of the schools have them, some of the schools don't. Some of the schools have registered certain courses or certain programs under that, and other programs they haven't. So just make sure that you can get a tax deductible receipt, because as far as I heard, your private pilot's license, you cannot count that and get tax money back on that tuition. But if you start a commercial license after that, subsequently you can claim your private pilot's license tuition fees back on taxes. And that could be potentially a lot of money in taxes that you want to get back. Whether you're working full-time, part-time, that's money in your pocket that you want to get back. The last question, which right now has been very significant, and I'm surprised about this because I thought, it's COVID, the flying industry. I'm sitting at the airport right now, and typically there's an airplane coming in every maybe 2 minutes, 3 minutes here, sometimes less than that. It's crazy. Today, one aircraft has landed in the past 20 minutes here. I'm right at the foot of the runway here. And so I'm thinking, yeah, there aren't going to be that many people learning how to fly. But apparently there are gigantic waiting lists right now for people learning how to fly. Some of the schools have waiting lists that are occasionally even a year or more long for the more popular schools. So ask them, is there a waiting list? How long is the waiting list? And for example, if you're someone like me who's in it to win it and you want to go full-time into this, sometimes they might make an exception for you and say, hey, well, you're full-time and we're looking for more full-time students because that's good for us, good for our instructors. We'll put you at the front of the list. That's what I'm hoping for right now for one of the schools that I've applied to. But it is just something to know because, if you are just thinking about going to these schools and then one day you're like, okay, I'm going to become a pilot, I want to start training, and then you go there and you're like, oh, I guess I have to wait a year. I would recommend going to almost all the schools as soon as you can, or calling them and putting your name on the waiting list as soon as possible, because again, it could be anywhere from months to a year to get in and start your training, even at some of the less good schools. So that's just something you want to keep in mind. Now, I do have one other question that I was asking, is whether or not some of these flight schools would be willing to rent me aircraft at cheaper prices than they list, maybe to reflect the prices that some of the rental organizations like the British Columbia or the West Coast Pilots Club rent aircraft out for. But unfortunately, because there are just so many students right now and so few planes, that's not a reality. But it's something you could possibly ask, and maybe if you're somewhere more remote, you might get a good deal. So it's just something to consider. All right, so that's all of my questions from all of my research. I hope this helps you out. I'll put a link to a doc that has all these questions, so you can just print it out or copy it, make a copy of your own on Google Docs, and bring it to the schools and write down the answers, or type it in your phone, or whatever you want to do. And hopefully this helps you out and helps you not get maybe ripped off, or not find yourself in a school where, you know, like things don't go so well. So these questions will really help you, definitely, in getting there. And I've also been interviewing students from the different schools in Vancouver. So over the next month or so, I'm going to be posting some videos of the interviews. Well, a lot of them will be me talking about the interview that I've recorded, because a lot of the students didn't want their identities revealed for obvious reasons. But you'll be able to see a little bit more about some of the schools. And while some of the schools have pleasant surprises, some of them have some pretty nasty surprises too. So I hope you all enjoyed this. You know, if you want to see more of this, I'd love to see you back. Please leave me a comment. If you want to like the video and subscribe to the channel, I'd be more than happy to have you join me on this journey on my late departure here. And hopefully, again, I can inspire some people who are also making some late departures or late in life career changes to the aviation industry even more possible. So I hope you all have a safe and wonderful time. Fly safe, and see you next time.